I dropped the delivery bag and ran. But when it spilled, it wasn't food inside. It was a mass of bloody human hair and a note that read, "We are right behind you." If you drive down Route 9G in upstate New York at exactly 3:14 a.m., you might see a neon sign flickering through the pine trees. It reads, "Leo's 24-hour diner. Don't stop." But if your gas tank is empty and you have no choice, remember the golden rule of the locals. Never look the cook in the eyes and never accept the late-night delivery gig. My name is Ethan. I was 22, broke, and desperate when I took the night shift at Leo's. The pay was unusually high, $50 an hour, cash. The manager, a pale man named Silas who smelled faintly of copper and old rain, handed me the keys to a rusted 2004 Chevy Malibu. "Only one rule here, Ethan," Silas said, his voice scraping like sandpaper. "Between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., the delivery bell might ring. If it does, you take the food. You drive to the address on the slip. You leave it on the porch. You do not knock. You do not wait for a tip. And, most importantly, if you hear someone calling your name from inside the house, you run." I laughed. I thought it was just some creepy hazing ritual for the new guy. That was my first mistake. For the first 3 weeks, the job was dead quiet. I mostly cleaned counters and drank stale coffee. But last Thursday, the clock on the wall clicked to 3:14 a.m. Ding. The order bell shattered the silence. I jumped. A brown paper bag was already sitting on the pass-through counter. I hadn't even heard Silas cook anything. Next to the bag was a grease-stained slip of paper with an address written in shaky red ink. 44 Blackwood Lane. Blackwood Lane was an abandoned dirt road deep in the woods, a place where teenagers went on Halloween to scare themselves. I grabbed the bag. It was surprisingly heavy, and it felt warm. Too warm, like a feverish forehead. A strange, sweet, sickening smell drifted from the staples, like burnt sugar mixed with something rotting. I got into the Chevy. The engine sputtered to life, and the radio immediately blared with static. Through the white noise, I could swear I heard a faint, rhythmic thumping, like a slow heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. I turned it off, shivering as the cold night air seeped through the cracked window. The drive into the woods took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. The tall pine trees leaned over the road, blocking out the moonlight, creating a tunnel of pure blackness. Finally, my headlights washed over 44 Blackwood Lane. It was a massive, Victorian-style house, completely overgrown with dead vines. The windows were dark and cracked, looking like hollow eye sockets. The whole place tilted slightly to the left, as if it were collapsing under the weight of its own dark history. Before we find out what was waiting inside that house, we put a lot of hard work into bringing terrifying stories like this to life for you every week. If you're enjoying the chills so far, please support the channel by hitting that like button and subscribing. It helps us keep the nightmares alive. Now, back to the story. My heart hammered against my ribs. Just put the bag on the porch and leave, I told myself. I stepped out of the car. The silence of the woods was absolute. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Every step I took on the gravel sounded like a gunshot. I walked up the creaking wooden stairs of the porch. The air here was freezing. My breath bloomed into white clouds. I gently placed the brown paper bag in front of the rotting oak door. I turned around to leave, a wave of relief washing over me. I had done it. Then, I heard it. Creep. The front door slowly swung inward. It hadn't been locked. It hadn't even been latched. I froze. My instinct yelled at me to sprint to the car, but curiosity, that primal, stupid human flaw, made me look back. The inside of the house was pitch black, but standing just 3 feet inside the doorway, right on the edge of the moonlight, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a tattered yellow dress. Her head was tilted at an unnatural 90-degree angle, resting almost flat against her shoulder. And she was smiling, a wide, jagged smile that stretched too far across her face. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. My boots felt like they were glued to the porch. The woman didn't look at the food, her milky, bloodshot eyes fixed entirely on me. Then, she opened her mouth. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. It wasn't a monster's voice. It was my mother's voice. "Ethan, honey, is that you? Why don't you come inside? It's so cold out there." My mother lived 3,000 miles away in California. "Ethan, please." The voice shifted. Now it was my little sister's voice, crying, desperate. "He's hurting me, Ethan. Come inside and save me." The psychological shock broke my paralysis. Fear surged through my veins like ice water. I stumbled backward off the porch, falling hard onto the gravel. The bag of food knocked over. The staples popped open. Under the dim headlights of my car, the contents of the delivery bag spilled out onto the dirt. It wasn't a burger. It wasn't fries. It was a mass of raw, bloody meat, wrapped in long, dark strands of human hair. And resting in the middle of the meat was a silver ring. A ring I recognized instantly. It was the unique, skull-shaped ring that Silas, my manager, always wore on his left thumb. The creature in the doorway let out a horrifying, metallic shriek, a sound like tearing metal. When it saw the food had spilled, it dropped to all fours, its limbs bending backward with sickening cracks, and lunged out of the house. I scrambled to my feet, throwing myself into the Chevy. I slammed the door shut, just as something heavy violently crashed against the driver's side window. The glass webbed with cracks. "Ethan, let us in!" 20 different voices, friends, family, people I hadn't seen in years, screamed simultaneously from the creature's throat. I turned the key. The engine cranked. "Come on, come on!" The creature was on the hood now. Its face was pressed against the windshield. Up close, I could see it had no skin around its lips, just exposed gums and rows of needle-sharp teeth. It began slamming its forehead against the glass. Crack! Crack! The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse and slammed on the gas. The Chevy fishtailed wildly down the dirt road. The creature was thrown off the hood, but it didn't stop. It chased the car on all fours, keeping pace with me at 40 miles an hour, its unnatural limbs moving like a spider's. I hit the main highway, my tires screaming. Only when I passed under the bright highway streetlights did the creature finally stop at the edge of the tree line, blending back into the shadows of Blackwood Lane. I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove straight to the police station. I paced around the lobby, sweating and shaking, until 2 officers finally agreed to drive out to Leo's diner to check things out. I sat in the back of their cruiser, my hands trembling uncontrollably. When we arrived, the neon sign was off. The diner was dark. The officers drew their guns and kicked the front door open. I stayed by the car, watching. 10 minutes later, one of the officers walked out, his face completely pale. He was holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside the bag was a cell phone. My cell phone. "Son," the officer said, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and horror. "We found this on the kitchen floor inside, but there is no Silas. In fact, this diner has been abandoned since 1994 after the original owner. Well, after he fed his staff to something in the woods." "That's impossible," I screamed. "I've been working here for a month. Look at the Chevy. Look at the cracked windshield." The officer sighed, pointing a flashlight at the car I had just driven. I looked. The Chevy Malibu wasn't a 2004 model anymore. It was a rusted skeletal wreck from the 1990s, covered in thick moss and dead leaves. The tires were completely rotted away, sitting flat on the rims. There was no gas in the tank. There hadn't been for 30 years. My heart stopped. If the car had been dead for decades, how did I drive it? Then my pocket vibrated. I reached down, my fingers brushing against cold metal. I pulled out a phone, a heavy, old model phone I had never seen before. The screen lit up. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo. It was a photo taken from the back seat of the police cruiser, looking at the back of my own head right now. Attached was a text. "Thank you for the delivery, Ethan, but you forgot to collect your tip. We are right behind you." I slowly turned my head to look through the back glass of the police car. There was nothing on the road behind us, just empty, black asphalt. I let out a shaky breath, forcing myself to calm down. It's a prank, I thought. Silas is messing with me. But when I looked back down at the strange phone in my hand, a new message popped up instantly. "Not outside, Ethan. Inside." My blood turned to ice. I didn't look out the back window. I looked at the rearview mirror of the police cruiser. The two officers were still standing near the diner's entrance, their flashlights beaming into the dark building. They weren't in the car, but in the front seat, sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat, was a figure. It was Silas. His back was to me, but his head slowly began to rotate. Not just a turn, it twisted all the way around, a full 180 degrees, until his face was staring directly into the back seat. His eyes were wide, completely black, and his jaw dropped open so wide it unhinged, hanging down to his chest. "Shift's not over yet, Ethan," Silas whispered. But it wasn't his voice anymore. It was my voice. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I grabbed the door handle, but the child locks were engaged. I was trapped in the back of a police car with a monster. Silas lunged through the partition, his elongated, thin fingers wrapping around my throat. The world began to spin. The flashing blue and red lights of the police cruiser started to blur into a single, flickering neon color. Green. The smell of old copper and rain vanished, replaced by the scent of grease and stale coffee. Ding! My eyes snapped open. I gasped for air, clutching my throat. I wasn't in the back of a police car. I wasn't on Blackwood Lane. I was standing behind the counter of Leo's 24-hour diner. The clock on the wall read 3:14 a.m. "Rough night?" a voice asked. I looked up. Silas was standing next to the grill, calmly flipping a burger. His skull-shaped silver ring glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights. He looked completely normal. I had a nightmare, I stammered, sweat dripping down my face. I dreamed I went to Blackwood Lane. There was a woman and a car that didn't work. Silas stopped flipping the burger. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the grill. "Ethan, you've been working here for 3 years," Silas said softly. "You make that same delivery every single night." My heart stopped. "What?" Silas finally turned to face me. He smiled, a wide, jagged smile that stretched just a bit too far across his face. "And every night, you forget," Silas whispered, his voice shifting into my mother's voice, then my sister's, then a metallic shriek, "because they always eat your memories before they let you come back." Ding. The delivery bell rang again. A brown paper bag was sitting on the pass-through counter, warm and bleeding from the bottom. Next to it was a slip of paper, 44 Blackwood Lane. I looked down at my hands. They were pale, thin, and covered in old, dry blood. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. I couldn't stop myself. My body was moving on its own. I walked out the door into the cold night, ready to make the delivery, again and again, for eternity.